retrospectively and start to look at kind of how I arrived at where I am right now. And one of the things that I've always been interested in is this world of hybridity, and really what it means is the world of digital architecture and physical architecture. And so I was back home in Silver City. I grew up in Silver City this week, and I was really starting to think about, you know, how I evolved. And one of the things that I ended up doing was going to Columbia and really being influenced by the people at Columbia, and really the kind of theoretical underpinnings of people like Walter Benjamin and Paul Virilio. And that really, you know, that kind of language that they were talking in really started to influence my work. So I kind of went back a little bit and started to look at this project that I did for Lincoln Center while I was a graduate student at Columbia, and really started to look at this notion of the information age. So this was 1994, and it was basically really looking at the idea of rethinking the library and really what the notion of architecture could become. We were working in silicone graphics workstations, and so we started to look at the potential of what it could become, and this is some of the animations that started to be produced. And what was interesting about it was I didn't know what it was, and I didn't really know how to take it, but I was inspired by it. And so I started looking at the notion of looking at dynamic skins. And so through the career, I actually ended up at the University of Arizona and started testing this with students. So this is actually a project that one of the students did, and what you'll see is on the right is an animation showing the repetition of being able to track movement. And on the left is an installation of people walking through a skin and being able to record that skin. So ultimately, that really started to get me thinking about this notion about how this can be applicable in the real world. And I started looking at the notion of how physical architecture and information start to relate to each other. So I started, this was a project that, you know, before the smartphone age started to emerge, I started to look at how that information could start to be transferred to architectures. That was a notion of fluidity in information. So then I had the opportunity to produce an exhibit for the AIA, and we started to do these photo montages that really started to look at how information could be mapped. And so that led into something called the Virtual Albuquerque project. And this was really a project that started to look at different criteria such as architecture, culture, geography, and history, and started to bring it together into a catalog, a repository that could be used by anybody. Ultimately, growing up in a rural environment, I started to look at places like Dixon and Embudo, and I worked on a project with Geraldine Forbes, the dean, and we started to look at how this repository, this information could be a way of looking at culture and history. And so this is something that we worked on. And then ultimately, I started to teach classes in the digital media department and started to look at the potential of multi-projected systems. And so this is a class that David Binding and myself, my immersive director at ARTSlab, started to look at, and how we could use a technology called Pico Projectors to start to look at how we can encompass maybe the new idea of immersive technology. Ultimately, we got an NSF grant to develop immersive portable visualization systems, and this is one system that we were able to start to bring to light. I was working with a student, Ian LeBlanc, and this is a structural system that we were able to start to convey the idea of taking the immersive condition of a dome and being able to apply it in multiple settings. So this was the first iteration. We had funding to do a couple of these. Unfortunately, we were only able to do one. But what was great about it is we were able to start to work with classes both in landscape architecture, computer science, and allow interactive content to be mapped into this dome. And what the great success about it is that we're still kind of figuring out its potential. So one of the things that we're working on right now is how to take this into the K through 12 experience. And so I'm working with a couple of professors in education that are really looking at this as a potential content for that venue. This is Joe Niss. He's a professor of computer science, and he was a surfboarder. And what we were really looking at is that dome. So this is our dome at ARTSlab, and really trying to create interactive content. The dome had always been a playback system, like you'd see a film. And so he decided that we should make an interactive board that would allow you to engage data. And so this is what we call the Hextech. So Joe was pretty involved in defining the mechanics. We were really supportive mechanism in terms of developing the architecture for it. So Eric Meyer, a former student from the undergraduate program, myself, and Ian LeBlanc developed the storyboard for putting this, what he called Hextech Turntable together. So the idea that you would have multiple decks and being able to interact with data at multiple scales. And so the idea was really to produce this at a full-scale venue. So this is 6 projectors at the opening of the Mesa del Sol. And it was all pneumatically driven, so you were able to interact with the visual data and get a response mechanism back on the hex decks. So this is Joe on top of it. And the idea was really to start to expand this palette and really be able to move into different venues. This is a class that I taught this spring. Again, looking at multi-projection systems so this was a couple of architecture students that worked on creating installations and using different deformations of planes, and then using one projector to create multiple content. Finally, one of the projects that I'm working on right now is something that was funded by the NEA, using the spoken word of Levi Romero and the imagery of Miguel Gandrit, and producing immersive content into spaces in plazas around New Mexico. So we're currently in the final iteration of this. This is the model that we've created. So this will go into the plazas in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Taos, and Silver City. And again, using the imagery from Miguel and the spoken word. And so we'll be out this next summer. So hopefully, if you're around Albuquerque, you'll be able to catch it, or up in Santa Fe. Thank you.